I escaped apartment 5C, but the story keeps rewriting me. Reddit drama story. They told me apartment 5C had been vacant since the spring of '97 when the last tenant, an older woman named Yelena Korovin, died suddenly. A heart attack, the super said. Peaceful, he added, as if that detail softened the way she was found. 3 weeks later, face down in her kitchen with flies swarming her open mouth. I didn't ask more. The rent was too good to question history. When I moved into 5B, directly below, I figured the silence upstairs would be a blessing. No late night heels tapping across hardwood, no blaring TV dramas bleeding through the ceiling. Just me, the ticking of my cheap clock, and the odd groan from the radiator when the temperature dipped. At least, that's how it started. The first noise came 2 nights after I moved in, soft dragging, like something heavy being pulled slowly across the floor. It went on for nearly 10 minutes, then stopped. I assumed maybe the building management had finally decided to clean the place out. But the next morning, when I passed 5C on my way out, there was no cart, no equipment, no scent of bleach or open door to signal anyone had entered. Just that same worn brass number and a lock that looked untouched. That week, the dragging returned 3 more times, always after midnight. Each time it got a little louder, more erratic, like someone was pacing the floor in uneven strides, pausing now and then to scrape something behind them. I knocked on the ceiling with the handle of a broom once, a lazy protest more than an actual complaint. The sound stopped immediately. But then, without warning, came a single knock in reply from directly above. I froze. The ceiling above my head was trembling ever so slightly, like someone was pressing their ear against the floorboards, listening. The next morning, I went straight to the super. He frowned when I mentioned noises from 50C. That place is locked. Hasn't been touched in years, he muttered, eyeing me like I might be angling for a rent discount. You sure it's not the pipes? This building's old. I nodded and left, but something in the way he said it, hesitant like he wasn't entirely convinced of his own explanation, stuck with me. I tried ignoring it. I blasted music at night, slept with earbuds in. But the sounds grew bolder. Scraping, yes, but now whispers too, faint and unintelligible, like a voice filtered through water. Once I woke to what sounded like fingernails tapping above me, slowly, rhythmically, like counting. 5 taps, a pause, then again. Always 5, always followed by silence so deep it made my ears ring. Then came the photographs. It started small. An envelope slid under my door with no return address. Inside were 6 Polaroids. Graded. They showed a woman in her 50s, short dark hair, standing in various parts of what looked like my apartment, but off. The wallpaper was wrong. The couch was green instead of gray, but the layout was unmistakable. One photo showed her standing in my kitchen, smiling at the camera. In another, she sat on a bed that was positioned exactly where mine was, except the room looked older, like it had been left untouched for decades. I turned the photos over. On the back of each was a date at all from 1996. I took them to the super, asked him if he recognized her. He took one glance and paled. That's Yelena, he said quietly. These are old. Where'd you get them? I didn't answer. I left before he could ask more. That night, I dreamed of her. Yelena, she was standing at the foot of my bed, holding a key and whispering something I couldn't understand. When I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat and my closet door, always left open, was shut. I hadn't touched it. The next few days passed in a haze. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified, every shadow too dark, too long. One afternoon, while pacing my kitchen, I looked up and noticed something strange. There was a patch on the ceiling that looked newer than the rest. The paint was a shade off, smoother. I stood on a chair and tapped it. Hollow. I pushed harder. The panel gave way with a soft pop, revealing a small crawl space between my ceiling and the floor of 50C. Inside were 2 things, a rusted tin box and a folded wool blanket. I pulled them down with shaking hands. The tin box creaked open to reveal more photos. This time of other tenants, ones I recognized. Mrs. Alder from 2A taken in the laundry room. Jonah from 3D eating dinner at his kitchen table, all shot from odd angles, like from behind a vent or through a crack in the wall. Watching them. One photo, near the bottom, made my blood run cold. It was of me, lying in bed, mouth slightly open in sleep. Taken from above. From 5C, I dropped the box and stumbled back, hitting my head on the cabinet. When I came to, the photos were gone. The crawl space above had been sealed shut. I checked the ceiling. No fresh paint, no patch, just solid, unbroken plaster. As if I had imagined the whole thing, but I hadn't. I know what I saw. The paranoia deepened. I stopped going to work. I started leaving salt lines at the windows, taped newspaper over the vents, unplugged everything at night. Every creak was a threat, every shadow a presence. I bought a cheap camera and set it to record the ceiling while I slept. In the morning, I'd watch the footage on fast forward. Nothing, for days. Then, on the fourth night, something. A distortion, like static around 3:14 m. A faint outline of a figure, only visible for 3 frames, standing near the far wall. Watching. The next frame, it was gone. I called the police, showed them the footage. They were polite but unconvinced. Old wiring, they said. Dust in the lens, you're stressed. They offered to do a wellness check on 50C. I followed them up, heart in my throat. The officer knocked twice, then turned the knob. It was locked. He fished out a master key and opened it. The door creaked and stale air rushed out. Dust hung thick in the light. The apartment was empty. Absolutely empty. No furniture. No carpet. Just floorboards warped with time and cracked paint on the walls. No signs of recent activity. No signs anyone had ever been there at all. They looked around, took a few photos, and left. Maybe it's time you talk to someone, one said gently, handing me a card for a therapist. I nodded, pocketed it, and closed the door behind them. That night, I moved my bed into the living room, slept with the lights on. Still, I dreamed. Of Yelena, of the woman I had never met but who somehow knew the layout of my life better than I did. In the dream, she was humming. A soft, broken tune. One I couldn't place but knew I'd heard before. When I woke, my window was open, the curtains blowing inward. On the floor, a new Polaroid, my face mid-scream, eyes wide, and behind me, barely visible in the reflection of the TV screen, a figure standing in the hallway, smiling. Not one else, or something else. The next morning, I called a moving company. I was leaving. I didn't care about breaking my lease. I didn't care about the deposit. I just needed out. As I packed, I noticed something strange. My reflection in the mirror didn't quite match my movements. A half-second delay. A tilt of the head I didn't make. When I turned away, I saw it smile. My reflection. Smile. Even though I hadn't, I ran. Left half my things behind. Slept in my car for 3 nights before finding a new place across town. Small, overpriced, but with paper-thin walls and noisy neighbors. Exactly what I wanted. I never went back for my things. I never looked at another Polaroid. And I never spoke of Yelena again. But some nights, when the world is quiet, I hear it. The dragging. Far off. Dull, like it's trying to find me again. And sometimes in the darkest moments before sleep, I wonder, what if I never left? What if I'm still there? Still lying in that bed, dreaming of escape, while something else walks around wearing my skin? The apartment I moved into after fleeing 5B was nothing special. Cramped, overpriced, walls the color of boiled oatmeal. But it was loud, and I wanted loud. I wanted the thud of someone stomping upstairs, a couple fighting through thin walls, the clatter of pans from the kitchen next door. I needed reminders that I wasn't alone anymore. And for a while, it worked. I fell into a routine. Late-night walks. Work shifts that blended one to the next. I drank more than I should have, slept with the lights on, and buried every thought of 50C under layers of distraction. No more photos. No more dreams. I didn't even own a mirror, just in case. But peace doesn't last. Not for people like me. People who peek behind locked doors. It started again a few months later, subtly like a shadow creeping back into your peripheral vision. I got home from work one night and found my front door ajar, just slightly, as if someone had pushed it and then changed their mind. I checked Engaged. There's nothing missing. Just that faint smell, like old lavender mixed with moldy wood. The scent I remembered too well from 50C. I changed the locks the next day. Still, I didn't sleep. And then the Polaroids returned, slid beneath the door in a plain envelope. No markings, no handwriting. Inside, 3 new photos. One of me leaving my building. One of me inside a grocery store aisle. And the last one, taken from behind my couch, showed the back of my head as I stared blankly at the TV. That one made me physically sick. I ran to every window, every vent, tore the place apart looking for a camera. Nothing. I confronted the building manager, threatened to go to the police. He swore no one had entered. But that haunted look in his eye when I mentioned 5C, that flicker of recognition, told me he knew more than he said. After that, I barely stayed in the apartment. Slept at friends' places, dozed in my car, crashed on a coworker's futon. I told them I was going through something. A breakup, maybe. Some vague excuse to avoid questions. One night, parked outside a gas station, I scrolled through old messages on my phone. I'd tried to document what had happened before. Texted myself notes, timestamps, descriptions of what I'd seen. But now, all of them were gone. Deleted. Every photo I'd taken, every video of the static frames. Wiped clean. Like I had never tried to prove it at all. All that remained was a single audio file. It had no name, no timestamp. Just a 3-minute recording titled, Wah. My thumb hovered over it. I didn't remember recording anything like that. When I pressed play, all I heard was silence at first, then faint breathing, then a voice, not mine, whispering words I couldn't fully make out. It repeated over and over until suddenly, at the 2-minute mark, it spoke clearly. You didn't leave, it said. A woman's voice, familiar. You only forgot you stayed. Then static, then nothing. My phone shut off immediately after. Wouldn't turn back on. I left it in a dumpster behind the gas station. The next few weeks blurred. I stopped talking to friends. Quit my job. Every reflection seemed delayed. Every camera lens seemed to twitch toward me. One afternoon, on a whim or out of madness, I went back. Not to the building, but to the public records office. I asked for everything on Yelena Korovin. There wasn't much. Rental agreement from 1995, a sparse death certificate listing cardiac arrest, and a single complaint made by a neighbor 2 weeks before her death. The complaint chilled me. It read, loud dragging sounds, screaming late at night, unexplained voices, filed by a tenant named Theodore Klein, a man who, it turned out, had disappeared shortly after filing the report. No follow-up, no body, just gone. That name stuck with me, Theodore. I searched for hours. Eventually, I found a scan of a missing persons flyer from 1997. His photo was small, faded, but his eyes, they looked mine, hollow. Afraid, the same hunted look I now saw every morning in the bathroom mirror if I dared to look. I began researching the building, digging deeper. Late nights on obscure forums, scouring archived newspapers, online databases. What I found was a patchwork of disturbing coincidences. 4 disappearances, all tenants of 5B or 5C, each within a year of each other starting in 1993. 2 women. 1 couple. And Theodore. The stories were always the same. They moved in. Strange behavior followed. Then they vanished without a trace. The police never connected the dots. After all, it was a transient area. People moved. People left. But I knew. I had lived it. The rot went deeper than a haunted apartment. This was systemic, alive, feeding, and I was the next course. Still, something inside me refused to flee again. I needed to know, not just what had happened to Yelena or Theodore, but what was 5DC. What did it want? Why did it let some go and swallow others whole? I began recording everything: journals, videos, voice memos. If I disappeared, I wanted something left behind that couldn't be erased. Something on paper, analog, real. And then, on a cold Sunday morning, I received a letter. No return address. The handwriting was neat, almost too neat. Inside was a single sentence written on yellowed stationery. You've been invited back. Come home. No signature, no instructions. But I knew exactly where to go. I returned to the building after dark, dressed in layers, a flashlight in one hand and my old apartment key in the other. 5B was still empty, the lock still broken from when I fled. The hallway smelled like dust and mothballs, but something else too. Faint lavender, that scent. That memory. I didn't hesitate. I walked up the stairs past the flickering 3rd floor light to the 5th floor. The door to 5C stood open. No key required. I stepped inside. Nothing had changed. The walls were bare. The floors cracked. But there was something wrong with the air. Thick, charged, like standing before a lightning strike. The room shimmered at the edges, slightly out of focus. I turned on my flashlight and for a brief second, the beam caught something. A mirror, standing alone in the far corner. Tall, framed in brass, and in the reflection I saw her, Yelena, standing beside me, smiling. I spun around. No one, just the empty room, but in the mirror she remained, watching. I stepped closer. Her expression didn't change, but behind her now stood others, figures blurry and indistinct. One was tall, one had a limp, one, I swear, had my face. I reached out to touch the mirror. The glass was cold, too cold. My breath fogged it, and when it cleared, the figures were gone. Only my reflection remained. And for a moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm. Home. That word echoed in my skull, home. I snapped out of it, turned and ran. Down the hall, down the stairs, out into the freezing night. But when I looked up at the building, 5C's window was lit. A soft yellow glow, and in the window stood a silhouette. Watching. I haven't gone back since. I changed my name. Moved 3 states away. But sometimes, at night, I feel it calling. In dreams, in static, in brief flashes of memory that don't belong to me. And once, just once, I found a photo on my doorstep of a man, thin, pale, eyes wide in horror. Theodore, with one word scrawled across the bottom: soon. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, left on the windowsill outside my 3rd-story apartment, impossible to reach without a ladder or flight. No return address, no postage. Just my new name written in looping cursive I didn't recognize. I hadn't spoken it aloud in weeks. I stared at the envelope for hours before touching it. When I finally did, it felt warm, like it had been resting against a body, not stone. Inside was a single photograph. An old one, faded and curled at the corners. It showed a hallway I hadn't seen in months, the corridor outside apartment 50C. Except this version looked different. Cleaner, sharper, like it was caught in the middle of renovation. The wallpaper was pristine, the sconces unbroken, and the carpet a vibrant red. But the detail that pulled the air from my lungs was this: at the far end of the hallway, just beside the doorframe, stood a small boy. Unmoving, pale, looking directly at the camera with eyes darker than ink. Scribbled on the back was the phrase, "The ones you leave behind don't always stay behind." I tore the photo in half and flushed it down the toilet in pieces. An hour later, a new copy lay on my kitchen table, untouched, undamaged. This wasn't haunting. This wasn't memory. This was pursuit. Something was tethered to me and distance was irrelevant. Whatever resided in that apartment had found a way to follow. I kept trying to rationalize. Maybe someone was tormenting me. A cruel prankster who had hacked into my life, tracing me from city to city. But the theory collapsed every time I remembered the impossible footage, the whispers, the mirrored delays. Things I couldn't replicate, couldn't record again. Things that vanished whenever someone else entered the room. I didn't sleep for days. I wandered the apartment at night, flipping the lights on and off, checking behind curtains, tapping on walls. Then came the knocking, at 333 am on the door, from inside the walls. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. As if calling to me, I pressed my ear against the plaster and whispered, "What do you want?" And from inside, so close it felt like breath against my cheek, came the reply, "We were here first." I stumbled back, knees weak, heart hammering in my chest. I tried to leave that night, threw clothes into a duffel and reached for the front door. But it wouldn't open, not stuck, locked. From the inside, and none of the keys on my ring worked. I turned back to find every window now opaque, fogged with a thick layer of condensation. I wiped at the glass and saw my own face staring back. Except it wasn't mine. The expression was wrong. The eyes didn't blink when I did, and behind that version of me stood a hallway I didn't recognize. Red carpet, brass sconces, 5C. I slammed the blinds shut and backed into the corner. I stayed there until the sun rose. The door opened just after dawn like nothing had happened. I walked out into the street, dazed, unsure if what I had experienced had been real. But in my coat pocket, I found something heavy, a rusted key. The kind you'd see in antique furniture, long and toothless. Attached was a tag. "Back where you belong." That was the breaking point. I went to the police. Told them everything, well, parts of it, enough to get their attention. I said someone had broken into my home, threatened me, left disturbing messages. They nodded politely, took notes, promised to send someone to investigate. But as I stood to leave, the officer glanced at my ID and frowned. "Didn't you already report a break-in in that old building on Presmore Avenue?" I froze. "No," I said, slowly. "That wasn't me." He looked confused, flipped his screen toward me, and there it was. My face, except older, more hollowed out. Same name, same birthday, filed 3 weeks earlier. Same address I had long abandoned. I stood up and left before he could ask anything else. That night, I dug out my journals. The ones I'd started to document everything. And they were wrong. Pages missing. Words were written. Entire entries that I knew I had written now said things I didn't remember thinking. One page simply read, "You dreamed it wrong. Let us show you how it really happened." I tried to burn them, but the fire wouldn't catch. The paper curled but never blackened. Smoke filled the room but no flame. I dropped them in the sink and ran the water. They floated, untouched. The water turned pink, then red, then thick, like blood. I closed my eyes and screamed. That night, the mirror in the bathroom cracked diagonally from corner to corner, and in the reflection I saw her again, not Yelena. A girl, younger, early 20s, her head tilted, her smile wide and wrong. She placed a finger over her lips, then raised her hand. It was missing 3 fingers. Only 2 remained, the index and the ring. She mouthed something. I leaned closer. "We remember you," she said. Then the glass shattered, and I fell backward into the tub. When I opened my eyes, the mirror was whole again, but I was bleeding from the palm. 5 small cuts, each in the shape of a finger. That was the first night I stopped locking the bathroom door. I needed escape routes. I didn't trust walls. Days passed. The world outside continued, but I was unraveling at the grocery store. I looked up and saw myself at the other end of the aisle. Not a mirror, another me. Shopping. Smiling at a child. The boy from the photo. I blinked, and they were gone. My reflection began speaking without me. Delays became divergences. At night, I heard my own voice from the kitchen when I was in the bedroom. "He won't last," it said once. "He's forgetting the shape of himself." I began blacking out. lost hours, waking up in unfamiliar parts of the city. Once I found myself standing at a hardware store checkout, purchasing 6 heavy-duty padlocks and a crowbar. I don't remember getting there. I don't remember why. The receipt had my name, but the signature was different, more elegant, cursive, like Yelena's. My therapist stopped answering calls. I hadn't even realized I had one until I found her card in my wallet. Her name scribbled over in red pen. Below it, a single word, Lear. I searched her online. Nothing. No license. No record. It was as if she had never existed. I found myself reaching for anchors, music, childhood photos, family, but my parents' phone numbers no longer connected. Disconnected. My brother's number redirected to an unfamiliar voicemail. The number you are trying to reach has been absorbed. Absorbed. Not disconnected. Not reassigned. Absorbed. I returned home and found a box on my bed. No label. Inside was a VS tape and a pair of gloves. Black leather, cracked with age. I don't own a VHS player, but somehow one now sat on my bookshelf. Dustless. Plugged in. Waiting. I played the tape, static at first. Then an image. My childhood bedroom. The lighting was wrong. Too dim, like filmed underwater. A young boy sat on the bed, me watching the camera. Behind him, the door creaked open. A woman entered. Her face flickered. First my mother. Then Yelena. Then the girl with missing fingers. She whispered something to the boy. He nodded. Got up. Left with her. The boy never looked back. The tape ended. The screen went black. But a message appeared, white text on empty void. You came with us once. Come again. I threw the tape out the window. It never landed. Just vanished mid-air. And the gloves. They were now on my hands. I hadn't noticed putting them on. They didn't come off. Still haven't. My skin beneath itches, pulses. Like something inside is trying to push out. I don't know what's real anymore. My reflection smiles when I cry. The cracks in the ceiling shift when I blink. My hands twitch toward doorknobs that don't exist. The layout of the apartment changes nightly. Last night, there was a hallway I'd never seen before. At the end, a red door. No handle. Just a brass plate with the word again. I didn't enter. I will. I know I will. But I'm not ready. Not yet. I still believe I can remember who I was. Who I am. But every photo says otherwise. Every whisper corrects me. Every night I feel them rewriting the script, one word at a time. If you're reading this, don't look for me. Don't try to find the building. It may not even exist anymore. It might be a place. A mind. A wound. But if you do stumble across a door with brass numbers 5C, whatever you do, don't knock. Because it will knock back. And when it does, you won't know who answered. You won't know if you answered. The days no longer feel like days. They are loops, folding into each other, melting time into a single unbroken thread that coils tighter around my neck with every breath. I stopped counting mornings because I no longer trust the sun. Sometimes it rises in the wrong direction. Sometimes it doesn't rise at all. And when it does, its light doesn't feel warm. It feels clinical, like the overhead glare of a hospital room you're not supposed to leave. I no longer live in my apartment. Or maybe I do, but it's not the one I moved into. The floor plan has shifted. Doors open to walls. Closets lead to staircases. Windows look out into blackness, like the outside world has been erased, replaced with an infinite echo chamber of what used to be reality. One night, I opened the front door and found an endless hallway. I walked for hours. The carpet was red. The wallpaper was the exact floral pattern from 50C. Every few meters, I passed framed photos. Some were mine, others weren't. In one, I stood at my 5th birthday party, a cake in front of me and candles burning, but my face had been replaced. Not scratched out, not blurred. Replaced with Yelena's. She wore my child body like a mask, smiling through my own mouth. In another, I was standing outside my old job, waving to someone off camera. But the reflection in the building's glass behind me wasn't mine. It was the girl with 2 fingers, her remaining hand pressed against the glass like she was trying to claw her way out. I kept walking. Eventually, I found a door labeled "storage." When I opened it, I saw a room filled with VHS tapes. Hundreds, thousands, stacked floor to ceiling, each labeled with a name and a date. Some names I recognized. Neighbors, coworkers, people I hadn't seen in years. Others were unfamiliar. One stood out, mine. The label read, "Final Cut Subject 515." I didn't touch it. I couldn't. But the moment I turned away, the lights in the storage room cut out. A projector buzzed on behind me. The tape began to play. And on the screen, I saw myself sitting exactly as I was now. Watching the screen, eyes wide unmoving, I turned to run, but the hallway was gone. Only blackness remained. Thick, wet blackness that swallowed sound and erased breath. I fell forward, arms outstretched, trying to find walls, boundaries, anything. But there was no floor, no ceiling, Only the low hum of static and a whisper. You're almost ready. I woke up in the bathtub, fully clothed, water overflowing onto the tile. The walls around me were covered in handprints. Child-sized. Hundreds of them, all pressed inward, as if something had tried to hold me under. My hands were pruned and pale, but when I lifted them, they didn't feel like mine. I held them up to the mirror, and the reflection showed gloves. Those cracked leather ones I thought I'd discarded. They'd fused to my skin. Black seams ran up my arms like veins. I tried cutting them off. The blades snapped. I tried burning them. The fire hissed and died. I tried praying. The prayer looped back on itself, repeating in my own voice from the other room. Deliver me, deliver me, deliver me. But the voice on the third repetition wasn't mine. It was deeper, familiar, laughing. There are moments of lucidity, short bursts. I find myself on the street, in front of a bus stop, or standing in line at a bakery. For a second, I feel human again, but people glance at me strangely, take a step back, or avoid my gaze entirely. Once a child looked up at me and screamed, not like a tantrum, but like recognition, like she knew exactly what I was. Her mother scolded her, but she kept staring, whispering, "He's leaking," over and over. I ran. I always run. But I don't know what I'm running from anymore. Or toward. Maybe there's no difference. One night, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the green button. A woman's voice spoke, slow, deliberate. "You can't die yet. We haven't finished writing your ending." I asked who she was. Her reply chilled my spine. "I'm the editor." The call ended. My phone melted in my hand moments later. The next day, a typewriter appeared in the center of my apartment. Old. Iron. No power cord. Just paper threaded into the roller and a single line typed at the top. Chapter 4. The Turning. I ripped the paper out and threw the machine out the window. It was back the next morning. The paper retyped. This time, the second line had been added. He finally understands his place. The keys began moving on their own. Typing. Fast. Aggressive. I watched as the story of my last week appeared on the page in perfect, chronological detail, including thoughts I'd never spoken aloud. The machine paused. The keys hovered. Then it typed. He stops resisting. I screamed and pulled the plug. Except there was no plug. I smashed the machine with a hammer. The next morning, it had multiplied. 3 new typewriters, all synced, all typing. The walls were covered in printouts. Dozens of pages stapled like script pages, stage directions, monologues, alternate endings, every one more horrific than the last. I tried tearing them down. They grew back. I tried painting over them. The paint peeled away to reveal new text. Always a story, always about me, but not told by me. I've come to realize this isn't just a haunting. It's authorship. Something is trying to rewrite me, to replace the real with a version of events that I don't control. I'm not being followed. I'm being redrafted. And every time I sleep, more edits are made. My voice sounds different. My handwriting changes. I opened my journal yesterday and saw unfamiliar words I had supposedly written. I consent. I didn't. I never would. But maybe that's the final twist. Maybe they're rewriting my refusal too. The girl with 2 fingers returns in dreams. She speaks now. Clearly, she tells me I'm almost complete, that the others were rough drafts. I'm the final manuscript. He was the easiest to finish, she says. He did most of the writing himself. She says I made it easy by documenting everything. All my recordings, gave them structure, rhythm, character development. A beginning, a middle, and now, they just need the ending. I stopped writing for a while after that, afraid I was feeding them, that every word was another page added to their story, another layer of my identity peeled away. But then I realized, if they're going to write me out, I want to leave something that they didn't author. Something real. These words. Raw. Unfiltered. Untouched by them for now, I hope. But even as I write this, the apartment hums. The lights dim. The air thickens. And I swear, out of the corner of my eye, the typewriter begins moving again. My fingers twitch, not from exhaustion, but from mimicry. I feel it creeping in. A second voice beneath my own thoughts. One that whispers what to say next, what to feel, how to act. It knows me now. Intimately. Better than I know myself. And soon I fear I won't know where I end and it begins. Maybe that's the point. Maybe I've been part of the story all along, just unaware I was a character. A placeholder, a narrative shell waiting to be filled. Because if 5th C was never a place, but a page, then I never moved out. I just turned to the next chapter. And the editor is still watching. Still revising. Still waiting for the final line. I wonder what it will be. Maybe I've already written it. Maybe I'm writing it now. I no longer remember the real shape of my face. Not in full. Reflections shift too much now, not just subtly but violently. Smiling when I weep, blinking when I stare still, aging forward and backward in flickers. Some mornings, I wake with a beard I never grew, eyes not my own, even hands with lines that run wrong, intersecting where they shouldn't. The gloves still won't come off. They've fused like second skin, and sometimes, when I press them against the mirror, they leave behind handprints that don't match the ones I see reflected back. I've stopped trusting anything with glass. I tried checking myself into a hospital. That's the rational thing to do when your world bends around you like paper in a storm. I walked in, head down, dirty backpack over my shoulder, and told the nurse at the front desk I was losing my grip. She nodded kindly and handed me a clipboard. "Name?" she asked. I hesitated. I gave her the one I thought I'd been using, the one I'd changed to. She frowned. "That's not what it says here." She turned the screen to me. It had my picture, but not now, me. A version of me that looked frozen in time, eyes vacant, smile too wide. The name below said, "Subject 515, draft in progress." My heart buckled. I turned to run. The automatic doors didn't open. Everyone in the waiting room had turned to look at me, but none of them had faces. Just smooth blank skin where features should have been. Featureless editors. One of them raised a hand, fingered. "Forefin missing." "We already admitted you," she said. Her voice came from the walls. I blacked out before I could scream. I woke on my floor, not at the hospital, surrounded by pages. Manuscript sheets typewritten, with red pen corrections in the margins. They described scenes from my life that hadn't happened. Me pushing a woman down a flight of stairs, screaming into the phone at a child, standing in front of an empty grave whispering, "Again, again." My mouth went dry. My hands shook. These weren't memories. They were suggestions. Drafts of what I was becoming. I've stopped trusting time. Clocks move backward or stop altogether. Some days pass in blinks. Others stretch for what feels like weeks. I once watched the sun set and rise 3 times in the span of one breath. I'm trapped in editorial limbo, like a page being written, erased, rephrased. Every choice I make is echoed by a presence just behind me, a correction hanging over my shoulder. If I walk left, I hear the typewriter keys clatter. Then the floor shifts and the hallway extends unnaturally to the right. I follow. I always follow. Sometimes I hear them practicing lines, not in my voice, in the voices of people I used to know, a chorus rehearsing from the shadows. He regrets nothing. He never wanted out. He chose this. The lines shift, contradict, then converge again, like the stories being re-outlined constantly. Fractals of possibility, all wearing my skin. The girl with 2 fingers visits more frequently now. In dreams. In the corners of rooms I thought were empty. Sometimes I find notes she's left, scrawled in charcoal on my walls, on my mirrors, even once etched into my skin overnight. "You are becoming," one said. "Don't fight the fold," another warned. Last week, I woke to find the message burned into my ceiling. Turn the page. The pages are multiplying. Not just around me, but inside me. I can feel them, layers of narrative threading through my memories. Some overlap with reality. Others I know are false. I remember a childhood pet that never existed, yet I can feel its fur, hear its bark. I recall funerals I've never attended, weddings I never ruined, crimes I didn't commit. Yet the shame sits in me like a stone. The more I resist, the more they bleed into me, like ink soaking through paper. I'm smudging at the edges. I've begun hearing the editor's voice clearly, always calm, genderless, dispassionate. It speaks in passive tense. The subject was made compliant. He's arc flattened. The final revision approaches. Sometimes it offers choices, but they're meaningless. Would you prefer to drown or vanish? Shall we end you in silence or noise? But each time I refuse, I wake to find a scene already acted out without my consent. Last week, I found my shoes soaked in brackish water, seaweed wrapped around the laces. I live in a landlocked state. I've tried to document everything in physical journals, pen on paper, but the words change overnight. Sentences I wrote become dialogue. He accepted it finally. He began to smile. I never smiled, but they keep writing it, keep insisting I did. They're building a version of me that fits their plot, a more cooperative protagonist. The final chapter is being written. I can feel it. The tension in the air has shifted. The hallucinations, if that's what they are, have become more stable, less chaotic, more narratively satisfying. They're funneling me toward an ending. The red door appears in every dream now, every mirror, sometimes even in the space between blinks. I've tried not to open it, but I know I will, not because I choose to, but because they've written it that way. Last night, the girl left a gift. A package wrapped in newspaper, tied with a black ribbon. No note. Inside a pen old, fountain style, the nib cracked, but carved along the barrel in tiny cursive were the words, "Write your own ending." A test, a trap, or a way out. I don't know, but I've been carrying it in my pocket ever since. They don't like it when I hold it. The typewriters stall. The lights flicker. My reflection hesitates, like it's unsure whether to mirror me or not. It's the only thing I've found that seems to push back, to break their rhythm. I'm starting to think the story doesn't end at the red door. Maybe it begins there. Maybe that's the true page one. Today, I saw someone else. Another person like me, I think. A man in a gray coat, pale, hollow eyes, standing across the street watching me. He held a notebook. When he saw me notice him, he lifted a page. It said only, "Not the first." Then he turned and vanished into an alley that didn't exist a moment earlier. I ran after him, but the alley was gone. In its place, a brick wall. Scrawled across it in black paint. This isn't fiction, it's a draft. I returned home. I opened the drawer where the pen had been. Now there were two. Identical. One for me. One for someone else. I left the second on my doorstep, hoping someone like me finds it. Hoping they're early enough in their own rewrite to resist. Or at least to remember. Because memory is the last thing I still trust, even as they edit it, even as they twist it. There are pieces they can't quite rewrite, like the sound of my mother's voice humming off key in the kitchen, or the way rain smelled the day I left the old building for the first time. Those shards remain untouched. I hold onto them like flares in the dark. I'm preparing for the final confrontation, not with them, but with the narrative itself. If they've made me a character, I'll make myself the author. The pen waits. The pages wait, the red door waits, and I'm almost ready to knock. Or maybe I already have. Maybe everything since that moment has been the aftermath. Maybe the door is open. Maybe the threshold was crossed long ago, and I've just been walking the hallway since. But if that's true, if this is the story they wanted, then why do I still hear her voice, faint but defiant, whispering, "You can still rewrite it. You don't belong on this page." Maybe I don't. Maybe none of us do, but the editors keep writing, and the typewriters never sleep. The night before it happened, before I made the final choice, I sat on the floor, pen in hand, the lights off, surrounded by pages that no longer reflected me. Dozens of scripts, manuscripts, journal entries were written. Dialogues I never spoke, drafts I never approved, all spiraling into a single narrative I no longer recognized. Somewhere between the sleepless nights and the hallucinations, the static and the whispers, I realized they weren't just rewriting my life, they were rehearsing it, over and over, repeating versions, testing endings, fine-tuning tone and timing. I wasn't just trapped in a story. I was an audition, a casting call for who I was supposed to become. But they'd made a mistake. They left me the pen. It didn't bleed ink like any ordinary pen. It didn't write unless you were ready. I know how that sounds. But the first time I pressed it to paper, the nib wouldn't budge. I tried scribbling nonsense, drawing symbols, even copying lines from their scripts, but nothing appeared. The page remained blank. The pen nuded. It wanted something real. So I waited too. The red door started appearing in every dream now. Closer, clearer. It used to be down long corridors at the edge of dark alleys, framed by impossible geometry and endless hallways. But now it stood before me, every night, inches away, breathing, pulsing. Like it had been alive all along and was just now waking up. On the seventh night, I reached for it. The handle was cold, not metallic, something deeper. Like touching time itself. A rush of memories flooded me that weren't mine. A woman trapped in a room with only a mirror and a phonograph. A child drawing chalk lines on the floor while humming a tune that hurt to hear. A man writing his own obituary repeatedly in a locked cabin with no windows. I felt them. All of them. The failed drafts, the discarded versions. The door opened inward. Inside was a room, a single chair, a desk, and the editor, not a creature, not a person, not even a voice this time. Just a presence. I knew it was the editor because the walls trembled with anticipation, because the pages scattered on the floor rose into the air, forming a cyclone of unwritten possibility, because the typewriter at the desk began clicking without anyone touching it, each key strike sounding like a heartbeat. And the moment I stepped in, the door vanished. The editor spoke without words. It pressed into my skull with a silence so complete it drowned out my thoughts. I didn't hear it. I understood it. It offered one last chance. Not escape. Integration. It wanted me to surrender the pen, to sign off on the story, to become the ending. The room filled with scenes, projections of every moment of my life, twisted through a cinematic lens. Stylized, dramatized, sterilized. The pain sharpened for effect. The hope muted. The complexity sanded down. I watched myself argue, laugh, cry, collapse, disappear. I watched alternate versions. Me as a monster, a coward, a martyr, a hero. Each version ended the same way, the red door swallowing me. But I hadn't used the pen. Not yet. It trembled in my hand like it had a heartbeat of its own. I looked down at it and whispered one question. Not aloud, but from somewhere deeper. If I write it, will it be mine? The editor paused. That was the crack. That was the gap they hadn't sealed. I moved to the desk. The typewriter tried to resist, keys jamming in protest. Pages flared around me, paper teeth gnashing, but I slammed the pen down on a blank page and finally it blood, not ink, something darker, something alive. It stained the paper like memory, and I wrote. Not the whole story, just a line. He walked away from the red door, and it never followed. The room screamed. Not a sound, but a vacuum. A ripping silence so loud it made the walls curl inward. The typewriter exploded into pieces of iron and bone. The desk cracked down the middle. The cyclone of pages disintegrated into ash. The editor flailed in a formless rage. It had been denied closure. I felt the room folding in on itself, collapsing. A story abandoned by its author. I ran. No hallway, no exit. But I ran. The floor disintegrated beneath me. I fell. Not through space, through structure, through chapters and pages and footnotes, through every false version of myself until only fragments remained. And then, nothing. I woke in a field. Grass damp with dew, sky open. Real. For the first time in what felt like centuries, I smelled dirt and morning and silence that wasn't waiting to be broken. I stood. The pen was gone. So was the red door. I wandered for hours before finding a road. A car passed. A woman waved. Her face had features. Her smile wasn't a mask. I cried then. Not because I was free, but because I didn't know if it was real. Weeks passed. I rented a small house on the edge of town. I started eating again. Sleeping. People talked to me like I was human. My reflection stopped mimicking me. It became me again. There were still nights when I heard faint clicking from distant rooms, like a typewriter warming up. Still mornings when the world felt slightly staged. But those moments passed. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole, but I was mine again. Until the day the mail came. One envelope, no return address. Inside, one page. Typed, one line. Every ending needs a reader. I burned it. But as the flames consumed the page, I saw my name at the bottom. Signed, not handwritten. Typed. I looked around the room. It was different. Subtly. The bookshelf was taller. The window now faced west. I stood, heart pounding. From the corner, faintly, the sound of keys began again. Not a piano, a typewriter. And on the wall, fresh and wet, a line written in ink that hadn't dried, Chapter 1. The story was never about ending. It was about rewrites. And I had just started a new one. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.